Welcome to the fourth branch program. Glad you can make it. I am MD. This program is dedicated exclusively for those with common sense, a spirit of patriotism, and a determination for a more perfect union. Stay tuned as we begin the discussion of a very important, interesting, and enlightening topic. Hope to hear from you soon. Happy listening. Any man can make mistakes, but only an idiot persists in his error. John F. Kennedy said, "The ignorance of one voter in a democracy impairs the security of us all." Hello everyone, I am MD and this is the fourth branch program. First, a warning. This program is not suitable for all audiences. I repeat, the content of this program is not for everyone. To find out if it's suitable to you, please answer the following two questions. Question number one, would you entrust your teenage daughter to a known rapist? Question number two, would you have a known pedophile cared for your toddler? Once again, would you entrust your teenage daughter to a known rapist? And question number two, would you have a known pedophile cared for your toddler? Your time is up, obviously. If you had difficulty answering both questions, this program is not for you. If you answered yes to either or to both questions, this program is definitely not for you. But if both of your answers are absolutely not, this program is catered to you. You should stick around. It is enlightening, interesting, educational, and informative. And today we will continue the discussion we have started, entitled Back to the Fight of the Entitlement. It is an interesting program that will impact your lives and those of future generations. Yesterday, we talked about Social Security. When we come back, we will continue the conversation and tackle Medicare as the next item in the conversation. I'll be right back. We began this program a few days ago when we looked at an interview that Mitch McConnell accorded to Bloomberg. And the very purpose of the interview, at least in Mitch McConnell's focus, was to bring attention to the debt that has increased, national debt that has increased, and to propose a solution. Now, his solution is to cut Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, or any type of program which brings some sort of relief to the rest of the population, to those in at the lower stratus of the financial ladder. Now, Mitch McConnell mentioned that it is a bipartisan problem, and he went on to explain that, yes, the debt has increased because of actions that both Democrats and Republicans have taken and made and fail to address the growing national debt. Personally, I find it necessary to talk about this particular issue, and the reason for that is because you may have not remembered, or that may have not been something of interest to you to know that it was one of the most hypocritical conversations that I heard from a politician who had in just a matter of 2 years, the Republican Party single-handedly had added $2.2 trillion to the national debt. No, this is not a partisan expression. This is not a partisan debate. On February 2017, both Congress and the Senate, including the executive branch, have signed a legislation to pass what they call a tax cut. At least that's what they use as a way to sell to the American public what they had in mind, $1.5 trillion. That's added to the national debt. And Republicans beat the drum across the nation to say that it is a tax cut for the people. Now, I am not going to discuss the detail of that once again, because yesterday in our introduction to the problem, we have discussed at great length this very issue. And if you want to take a look at the first video, it is posted on the People Branch YouTube channel. On your screen, it is the information to the YouTube channel. It is on the People Branch YouTube channel. You will find the discussion that we started in regards to that very problem. We discussed yesterday the Social Security aspect of the problem. Now, what we hope to achieve is to show you all those different items that Mr. McConnell proposed to cut in order to address the growing national debt. Now, it is important to pay attention, and the reason for that is because it's not just you who are going to pay for what Mr. McConnell proposed, but your kids, your grandkids, your great-grandkids, and continuously, actually beyond your great-grandkids, will have to pay for what Mr. McConnell proposed. Now, when there is a crisis, whatever that crisis is, if it is a national crisis, everybody expects that every citizen in the country would lend a hand and try to solve the problem, whatever that problem is. Now, the national debt is obviously a problem for the country. It's called national debt. But I want to quickly point out an important piece of information, because in interaction with individuals who belong to the Republican Party, the argument they usually like to make is the Obama administration did increase the debt. So why talk about only the Republican? Because that's usually the argument whenever the issue of national debt emerge or arises. Then the conversation, there is really very little room to talk about a possible solution to the problem. And the reason for that is because it's almost as if Republicans in general don't want a solution to the problem, because if the issue is broad, it automatically reverts to, well, it did happen under Obama as well. And that's a reason, whatever the issue is on national stage, it becomes almost impossible to solve that problem, because there is no way to put the problem in context in order to find a solution. Now, for that reason, I want to address, now we're here to talk about the Medicare aspect of the problem. Remember, I mentioned earlier that the solution that Mitch McConnell proposed, because today we're talking about those three major items: Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. We talked about Social Security yesterday. Again, I would like to encourage you to take a look at the video that is posted on the People Branch YouTube channel, in which we discuss in great length the aspect of the Social Security, which is one of the items that Mitch McConnell proposed to cut. Now, before we talk about the Medicare aspect, I want to explain something that seems to be what I would call an obstacle to a solution for this particular problem. When Bill Clinton was president of the United States, he left the country with a surplus. In other words, no one in the country, Democrat or Republican, could talk about the Bill Clinton administration of having increased the debt, because he walks away from the presidency leaving behind a surplus. The Bush administration took over. In case you don't know, the Bush administration is Republican, or was Republican, took over in a matter of 1 year, wipe out the surplus, and increase the debt. Now, I'm not going to spend the time to detail the aspect, because there is a conversation to be had when we say Bill Clinton left a surplus. It's on paper, meaning if every administration after Bill Clinton were to follow the recipe for what he did in under his administration, by year X, all debt would have been erased and we would have had a surplus. That's what that means. That doesn't mean that there was a surplus. But when the Bush administration walks in, instead of doing that, what they did is they took the surplus that would have been created had the process continue and distributed it in the form of tax cut. As you can tell, Republicans love the idea of tax cut. Democrats came, cleaned up the mess, left a surplus. Republicans came and changed the whole landscape. So under the Bush administration, a package, just like we're talking about today, package was proposed and tax cut was done. And at the end of the Bush administration, national debt has increased. And on top of that, an economy in tatter, financial meltdown, financial crisis was what Mr. Obama inherited. And that's the reason I wanted to talk about that very aspect. Mr. Obama moved into the Oval Office, not only with debt, national debt increasing, but also with the financial situation of the country in bad shape. Now, no matter what you think, no matter what the argument is, no one can argue the fact that any president, Democrat or Republican, would have had to borrow money in order to attend to the financial crisis. Leak in your house, boiler broke down, bunch of other problems. No matter how much in debt you are, you have to go and borrow money to fix the problem. You cannot live in the house with a leaked roof. You're gonna have to borrow money. You cannot live in a house with no boiler. You're gonna have to borrow money. So yes, the Obama administration had to borrow money in order to fix the financial problem. That is the context. Not the same thing. When George Bush took over, there was no reason to borrow money for anything. But we went to war with Iraq, which we didn't have to, so we had to borrow money to go to war. And there was a financial meltdown, which means things were going from bad to worse. So yes, when Obama took over, there was no if and but about it. His administration had to borrow money to fix the problem. But when Donald Trump took over, there was no reason to borrow money. None whatsoever. And that's the context. So when we're talking about debt, and for reason that sometimes that's exclusively partisan, Republicans tend to want to bring the conversation that the debt was double under Obama. I'm not sure that's the case, but be it as it may, there was a context, there was a reason for the Obama administration to borrow money in order to fix the financial problem. So there is no argument there, regardless of which political party you belong to, there cannot be any argument there. But both under the Bush administration and under the Trump administration, there was no argument to borrow money. Under the Bush administration, a surplus turned into debt. Under the Trump administration, economy was booming. there was no reason to borrow money to add to the national debt. So that's the context. And that's the reason every time you hear someone in the Republican Party making that argument, it's because they simply could not care less about national debt. Because under Obama, there was a context. Country in problem, financial situation was bad. Yes, any president would have had to borrow money to fix the problem. That wasn't the situation under Bush. That wasn't the situation under Donald Trump. So that's the context. Now on to the subject at hand, because I had to clear that up, because every time I talk to a Republican, that's what I always hear as a defense, that Obama doubled the national debt. Now, let's get back to the topic at hand. When Mitch McConnell mentioned it's a bipartisan problem, it is not a bipartisan problem. The debt was increased under George W. Bush single-handedly. Democrats didn't go along with it because there was no reason for it. Under Donald Trump, Republicans once again single-handedly passed a quote-unquote tax cut. Democrat wasn't involved, wasn't invited. In fact, 60% of the people, American constituents, said no to that. So no, it's not a bipartisan problem. As you can see, from 2000 to today, it's been Republicans single-handedly adding to the national debt. So no, it's not a bipartisan problem. For a reason that exclusively partisan, Republicans have the knack of simply adding to the national debt and then turn around to say, let's try to solve the problem. As I mentioned yesterday, the $1.5 trillion tax cut that Republican called tax cut, yes, it is a tax cut for large corporation and wealthy individual, but it is a tax debt for the rest of the country. Yesterday, I mentioned that this is what we have with the $1.5 trillion. The Republican borrowed, literally, it's not money that we have, $1.5 trillion. Now, the big piece of pie, the blue big piece of pie that you are looking at on your screen, it's $1.2 trillion that were given to large corporations and wealthy individuals. And the small piece, the green piece that you see on your screen is 0.3, that $300 billion that were used to distribute to everybody else. And that's a reason if you see an extra $40 or $60 on your paycheck, that's what that means. That piece of pie. So 1.2 trillion, the bigger portion of the pie, of the money that was borrowed, given to large corporations and wealthy individuals. And the $300 billion were used to distribute with everybody else. That's why you could only get $40 or $60 on your paycheck. I know that because I have in my hand a paycheck. And since I'm not among those millionaires, then just like those claiming that they're grateful enough to get $40, $60 on their paycheck, now I do have bad news, and I don't mean it as a way of speaking. I mean it literally. because those 40 and 60 or $60 that you're getting on your paycheck, first, it's not for long, and second, you are on the hook for the whole $1.5 trillion. Now remember on the picture that I showed you earlier, the pie, we the people are getting a very small piece of the pie. But guess what? We are responsible to pay back everything on that pie. And I don't mean it as a joke, and I don't mean it, I mean it literally, that we, the people, are fully responsible for the whole $1.5 trillion debt. Now, it's even worse than that because there was also a $675 billion defense spending that were also passed, which were added to the national debt, which bring the national debt during the 2 years that Trump has been in the Oval Office to $2.2 trillion. In just 2 years, the Trump administration already added to the national debt $2.2 trillion. Now, the difference is because that was not necessary. 60% of the people living in the United States, the American constituents, said, no, we didn't want it, we didn't need it. But Republicans went forward anyway and did it anyway. And the reason is because they wanted to give a tax cut not to us, but to wealthy individuals, to large corporations. Now, you may want to know at this point the reason that Mitch McConnell is out there talking about cutting Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, is because he's looking for a way to pay for that, those debt that he just added to those $2.2 trillion. He just added to the national debt. Now, this is where you don't have to be a genius, but for God's sake, even if it's not for yourself, but for your kids, for your grandkids, for your great-grandkids, when someone comes to you, and here is what happened with this whole tax cut. And for a reason that sometimes is beyond logic, the Republican constituent support their representative despite the fact what the representative are doing are harmful for the country, are harmful for them. Because those $1.5 trillion, if I were to come to you and said, I just borrowed $100,000 and I give you $10,000 out of those $100,000. Now, if I just give you $10,000 out of those $100,000 and said nothing to you, you would be grateful, you would thank me, and you would think, whoa, that guy is a great guy. He borrowed $100,000 and he gave me $10,000. Doesn't ask me for anything, doesn't say anything, he just say, hey, here's $10,000. Now, you would accept it, obviously. And I walk away, then you feel there is nothing to worry about because I didn't tell you anything. In fact, I may have not even told you that I borrowed that money. I may lie to you that I won the lottery. So you would be more than grateful to think, oh gee, that guy just give me $10,000. He won the lottery, he gave me $10,000 out of his bounty. But when a year later, and that's the part that you don't know, that a year later, you will receive in the mail a statement that says that you now owe $100,000. First, get the shock of your life because you never borrowed $100,000. You never went to a bank and borrowed $100,000. Now, if I did mention to you when I was giving you the $10,000 that I borrowed $100,000, automatically that would have come to your mind and said, maybe that's a mistake because I know so-and-so did borrow $100,000. I did not borrow $100,000. The only thing I remember that so-and-so borrowed $100,000 and gave me $10,000. That's pretty much it. That's my relationship with those $100,000. And it didn't say that I have to give him that money back. But you receive that statement. Now you owe $100,000. But what makes it worse? You didn't go to the bank to borrow $100,000. And second, you only got $10,000, but now you have to pay $100,000. Now, if it were to be me and you, two individuals, then you can argue the case, you can be upset, you can do whatever, even go to court and refuse to pay the $100,000 because you never apply for $100,000 loan. Now, the most you probably would say that since you received $10,000 from that, then you'll give those $10,000 back. But unfortunately, with the $1.5 trillion, you don't have that luxury because it will be taken from you. Things that the government does, they take it from your paycheck. As long as you work, you don't have a way of preventing the government from taking it from you. That's the difference. But nevertheless, the point I'm trying to make is the fact that if you knew when I borrowed those $100,000 and gave you those $10,000, then you would be on the hook for $100,000. You would have, first of all, not take those $10,000 from me and refuse to be on the hook for the $100,000. Now, those individuals that are so grateful, they get $40, $60 on their paycheck, and they're so happy, they say they're grateful that they get that. Picture it the same way. You would be grateful to get those $10,000 from me, except for one problem. You're not going to keep getting $10,000. Now, if I wanted to make it sounds like the $40, the $60 you're getting on your paycheck, instead of giving you $10,000 at once, I could have stopped by every week and give you $1,000. And you would have thought of me as a great guy. Every week he stopped by, he gave me $1,000. So of course, at the end of the 10th week, I would stop giving you money because that was the plan, to give you $10,000. So the $40, the $60 that you're getting on your paycheck is not a permanent affair. Instead of giving you the $10,000 at once, what the government is doing is giving you small chunks of that money. And at the end of my 10 week giving you $1,000, I stop giving you money. You still would be grateful because, hey, you didn't have $10,000. For 10 weeks, you get $1,000. You would still be grateful until later when you receive that statement from the bank that clearly say you owe $100,000 and gives you an amount to pay regularly in order to bring that money, debt down. That's when you would start getting very upset. Of course, it will be upsetting, because for a reason that you didn't ask for $40 or $60 on your paycheck. Yes, you're grateful you have it, but you didn't ask for it. Just the same reason, the same way that if I were to give you $10,000 after I borrow from the bank $100,000, you didn't ask me for it. So that's the same thing. And it's not assumption. That's just what the Republican on February 27 passed a piece of legislation that take $1.5 trillion borrowed, give 1.2 to large corporation and wealthy individual, and give the rest of the people $300 billion. But we, the people, all of the people, are now responsible for $1.5 trillion. And it is a guarantee, neither you nor I, which means not this generation, not the next, not the next after that, not the next beyond that, will be able to finish paying that debt. So our kids, grandkids, great-grandkids, and beyond are on the hook for those $40 and $60 that you're so grateful to have gotten. That's why you have Mitch McConnell out there now asking to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Now, what that means in plain English, not only Republican borrowed $1.5 trillion and you get crumbs out of that, now they're saying it's going to get worse for you because we're going to cut your Social Security check. Let's say, for sake of argument, you were to receive $5,000 when you retire, but now you may only get $3,500. See how it works? That money that they borrowed, that Republican borrowed, and give to those who already have, corporation and wealthy individual, those are people who already have plenty, who didn't need any of that. They give that money to them. That's why you're only getting $40 or $60. Now, Mitch McConnell wants you to forego some of your Social Security check in order to pay for that. Now, what even more insulting is the fact that the people, the large corporation, and the wealthy individual who didn't need the money, who received it, they will pay zero. And this is not a speculation. That's what on the legislation. They don't have to pay a single penny. We, the people, are on the hook to pay for the whole thing. And you tell me, how smart is that? How smart is that? When I look at my paycheck, I clearly see that I'm paying Medicare, I'm paying Social Security. So I'm not going to be given a handout when I retire because I contributed during the time that I work. I put money in that coffer, the Social Security, the Medicare coffer. I invested. Everybody who worked, money is taken from my paycheck. I didn't even have a say over that. It's not that I was given the option. I didn't even have a say. Before I get that paycheck, money is already taken from it. And now, Mitch McConnell the Republican Party already, without any input from Democrats, without any approval from Democrats, in fact, without the approval of 60% of the people in the country, went ahead and provided a tax cut to corporation and wealthy individual, but now want me and the rest of the people to pay for that. That is unacceptable at any level. Now, you may be fine with that because, well, you were raised in a family where your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents were Republican, and you're going to be Republican all your lives because Republicans are so good at doing things. Now, you may have missed it, but I'm going to repeat it here again for you so that you can get an understanding of why you cannot just be a member of a party just because you were born into it or you were raised into it and you've seen that what your parents, your grandparents, or your great-grandparents have been, and you've been brainwashed by the fact that Republicans are so good. They're fiscally conservative, except that they're not. That's what Republicans always run under, like they're fiscally conservative. They want to control the national debt. And yet, every time that there is an opportunity for them to do exactly that, they do just the opposite. So no, Republican, it is just what they like to tell you. Your Republican representative like to tell you they're fiscally conservative. They like to control, to get a handle of the debt. It's like your spouse saying that they're faithful to you, but every time that they go out cheating. This is just telling you one thing, but being just a different individual. This is exactly what we're talking about today. So I don't want my Medicare, just like I explained yesterday on the Social Security, to be affected because Republicans decided to borrow money and give to those who already have, and now coming to me and say, I want to cut your Social Security, your Medicare, in order to pay for that. That's something that should have been thought well before time. Now, I don't know about you, but this is not something I can go along with, because it's one thing that there is a national crisis that we're trying to resolve. But when someone deliberately decide to go and make something a problem, and then now coming and say, let's solve the problem. It's not a bipartisan problem. Both under the Bush administration, when the tax cut was done, most of the money went to wealthy individuals. Again, under Donald Trump, the $1.5 trillion tax cut went to wealthy corporation and a wealthy individual and large corporation. Just really crumbs went to the people. And yet, we are on the hook for the debt. That's unacceptable. It is absolutely unacceptable. When we come back, we will take a look at Medicare. We talked about Social Security yesterday. As I mentioned, I strongly encourage you to take a look on the People Branch YouTube channel. That for all the topics we will discuss here on the Fourth Branch, they are located on the People Branch YouTube channel, where you can find information, important information, not information about Democrat or Republican, because those information I'm providing to you, they're not a Democrat or Republican information. They are information that give you at least the knowledge to understand what is. Those are facts that can be easily verified, and you can make your decision based on those things. Because our lives are impacted by what our representative in Washington do, Democrat or Republican. And this is one aspect that I am personally very upset about this problem, because it's not created by me. It's not created by we the people. It's a group of people, Republican in this case, who decided to add to the national debt for no reason whatsoever. There was no justification. And on top of that, if someone were to borrow $100,000 and come and give that to you without you asking, and you don't know that the money was borrowed, but you get everything, then at the very least you could say later on, at least that I took advantage of that. But no, that's not what happened. They took the $100,000, they take $90,000 out of that, give to people who already have, and give you $10,000, but you are responsible to pay back the whole $100,000. That's not acceptable under any circumstance. Democrat or Republican, no matter what you are, you cannot possibly go along with that kind of thinking. And now Mitch McConnell wants to cut down debt. Proposition, let's cut down Social Security. Let's cut Medicare. When we come back, we'll talk about Medicare. Don't go anywhere. In 1996, a small network by the name of Fox News was launched with just 17 million viewers. Today, with over 100 million people watching regularly, Fox has become the greatest threat to our democracy, constantly bombarding the airwaves with false information, distortion of facts, and outright lies, presenting to its audience as news. Fox has created an army of blissful ignorance. According to a recent survey, 82% of Fox viewers are ignorant of facts and the truth. To keep millions of people in ignorance not only prevents democracy from flourishing, but it also clears the path to authoritarianism, to dictatorship. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Let me finish by saying that democracy cannot survive in an environment where truth and facts do not matter. At Fox, truth and facts do not matter. Indeed, democracy in America is in jeopardy. It is a crisis the country can no longer ignore. Join me here on the fourth branch at 10:30 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. every Saturday. we are talking about Medicare. More specifically, back to the fight of the entitlement system. And the reason we're talking about it is because a couple of days ago, Mitch McConnell, he's the Senate Majority Leader for the Republican Party, proposed to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid in order to pay for the growing national debt. Mr. McConnell called it a bipartisan problem. We say hogwash. $2.2 trillion were added to the national debt this year alone, exclusively by the Republican, and for no reason whatsoever. Yes, we said no reason whatsoever. Sometimes there are debts that are occurred and there are logical, rational reason behind it. Yes, we gave you plenty of such example. If you have the leak, if the roof in your house leaking, the boiler broken, yes, no matter how much in debt you are going to have to borrow money to fix the problem. Same thing with the country. When the country was in financial meltdown, in crisis, shedding jobs left and right, the Obama administration had to borrow money in order to fix the problem. Under the Trump administration, there is no such issue. The economy, Mr. Trump inherited an economy, a growing economy, a very healthy economy. There was no reason for to borrow money for any tax cut. And besides, nobody received a tax cut except large corporation and wealthy individual. So having said that, and because Mitch McConnell is now proposing to cut Social Security and Medicare, we wish to talk about those items. Yesterday we talked about Social Security. Today we're going to be talking about Medicare. Medicare, before we actually tackle the detail about Medicare, let's talk about let's do a little bit of a history about Medicare. Now, Medicare was initially a medical care program that were for families and individuals in the military, as part of a program that were provided by the government for a Dependent Medical Care Act, under the Dependent Medical Care Act that was passed in 1956. Now, as far as the actual Medicare program itself, it was for the first time in 1961, it was Dwight Eisenhower, President Dwight Eisenhower, for the first time, who held a conference on the aging population. So Dwight Eisenhower, in January of 1961, wanted some sort of program, healthcare program that would address the aging population, and the way that he went at that is to actually, he wanted that program for the benefit of those who were on Social Security benefits. In other words, we're talking about people who already retired, people who were no longer working. So that was the proposition, because at that point, although prior to that, for the Social Security Act, which was providing in 1935, as we discussed yesterday, Social Security Act was passed in order to provide some measure of some sort of benefits to those who were retired after contributing to while they were working. Now, but there was no healthcare benefit for them, so they had to pay for their healthcare. So in 1961, Dwight Eisenhower proposed in a conference to have a healthcare program for those who were already on Social Security benefit. So He proposed that in 1961, but it was not until 1965 that the President Lyndon Johnson would have enacted under the Medicare an act under the Title 18 of the Social Security Act would have the Medicare program. So 1961, Dwight Eisenhower gave a conference on the aging population and proposed some sort of healthcare system for those already on Social Security. So in 1965, President Lyndon Johnson, and if you're paying attention, both Dwight Eisenhower and Lyndon Johnson were Democrat president. Now, and the reason I mentioned that is because I mentioned earlier, or rather yesterday when I was discussing Social Security, that if you're paying attention, that all the major programs, benefits that we today, the whole country enjoy, were not just proposed by Democrats, but were also enacted and passed by Democrats, and Republicans were always against those programs in the beginning. Republicans were against Social Security. Passed later on, of course, they joined in the rank later on because they had no choice. It was being passed. Again, when the Medicare program was proposed, once again, Republicans were overwhelmingly against that. They didn't want any Medicare program. But nevertheless, Lyndon Johnson signed in 1965, but more specifically July 30th, 1965, Lyndon Johnson signed the Medicare, what is today called as the Medicare program, under the Title 18 of the Social Security Act. So Medicare was passed. Reluctantly, grudgingly, Republicans, of course, didn't have a choice. So it was passed. And they tried, just like you see today, that I've been trying for the longest to kill Obamacare. And that's exactly the same thing that Republicans were doing then. So if you are a Republican, it had to ring a bell in your head. Why in the world that every time that there is a program that will benefit the constituent, the nation, why in the world Republicans always against them, against those programs? So the Social Security today, now they're not, and here's what even worse than just being against those programs. Even after the programs have been passed and how those programs benefit everybody in the country, time and again, Republicans want to end those programs. Time and again. Which means if Democrats are not fighting to keep those programs around, sooner or later, they will not be around. Because if it is up to Republicans only, the Social Security that your grandparents, great-grandparents, your parents, and you will enjoy, those programs will not be around for your kids, your grandkids, and your great-grandkids, because Republicans at every step of the way, they want to put an end to those programs. And those are not speculation, because they have tried again and again and again to do that. You may not remember, but Republicans have already proposed to privatize Social Security and Medicare. They want to privatize. Translation, get rid of. Once something is privatized, a program like Medicare and Social Security, you may not know that, but that's really the idea. It's a step towards getting rid of. Of course, there is always an argument they will provide some sort of information to buy your vote into accepting that. Now back to Medicare. So in 1965, at the Harry Truman Presidential Library, Lyndon Johnson signed the Medicare Act. July 30th, 1965. And it so happened, interestingly enough, that the former First Lady, Bess Truman, along with the 33rd President, Harry Truman, became the first recipient of the program. Isn't that interesting? Quite interesting, isn't it? Harry Truman was the 33rd President of the United States, and Lyndon Johnson, who was the 36th President of the United States, signed the Medicare Act in July of 1965. And it so happened that Harry Truman, the 33rd President, and his wife were the very first recipient of the program. Now, the program has gone through a number, many changes throughout the years. That's acceptable because there is, when a program first comes into existence, there is no way in the world to know, to make it perfect. So yes, along the way, there are going to be changes made to whatever program. It's never going to be perfect. Just like we're talking about Obamacare today. Republican wants to kill Obamacare because it doesn't do this, it doesn't do that, it doesn't do the other. The idea is not that any program that introduced to help the constituent will never be perfect. But over the years, there can be improvement done to the program, not necessarily kill the program, about making improvement to the program. So the same thing happened with Medicare. Over many years, a lot of different things had happened to the program. In fact, although the Medicare Act was signed just for the people who were advanced in age, people who were 65 and older, but over the years, that it had included people with disability. People with speech, physical disability were added to the program. And a number of different options were added as time goes by. And the reason that happened is because, as I mentioned, there is no way when a program is introduced for you to know everything that there is to know that's needed about the program. Because you may have studied it a certain way, and as time goes by, you realize that, oh, it's missing this, it's missing that. Or it may have something that is not needed. So yes, there's going to be a lot of change done to the program, which is just fine. So over the years, it's not just people who are 65 and older who benefit of Medicare. You have people with disability also benefit of this program. People who have some sort of disease. For instance, people who have what they call end-stage renal disease, ESRD, those people too can take advantage of Medicare. And so on and so forth. But the main aspect of the program that was passed on July 30th, 1965 is to provide health care for older people, 65 and older. Now, nobody is saying that Medicare is perfect. I'm sure it has many flaws. What else is there? We are human beings. We have many flaws. So if something is created by us, it is without saying that there are going to be flaws, and we can fix those flaws, those problems along the way. There is nothing wrong with that. But what always take me aback is the fact that for reasons that defy logic, the Republican legislators, Republican representatives, the very people whose job is to work towards improving the lives of the constituent, the American constituents, and time and again, they are the same individual who do things that harm, that hurt. And this is not a speculation. When Social Security was proposed in 1935, Republicans opposed it. Today, tell me, can you imagine retire and not receiving your Social Security check? It was a program that was instituted by Democrat president, and that happened to be one of the major piece of art done in the existence of the country. Again, in 1965, when Medicare was proposed, Republicans once again can't hear of it. It's time and again. It's not something that happened once. It's again and again and again, even up to today, when Obama decided to extend health care to individuals who could not get health care, Republicans overwhelmingly opposed it. Now, for the defense of the constituent, they were deceived by the Republican leaders who kept introducing information that weren't even true. That's why I mentioned, if you go to the People Branch YouTube channel, you would notice that on the body of the description, I mentioned that Republicans for legislators, they always resort to deception in order to advance an agenda. Now, if I'm selling you something, if I want to sell you something that's good, or I want to warn you about something that's bad, why do I have to lie about it? Why do I have? That's not politics. When Republicans wanted to pass to borrow the $1.5 trillion and add it to the national debt, they beat the drum of tax cut for the people. That's deception. This is not politics. That's deception, because it wasn't a surprise for the Republican legislators how they want to distribute that money. It was not a surprise. They knew the way that they wanted that money to be distributed is to have $1.2 trillion going to the large corporation and wealthy individual, and the $300 billion to go to the people. So it wasn't a surprise for them. They're the one who crafted the legislation. But they trade in deception. So Republican legislators, we're not even talking about politics anymore. They only trade in deception to get something to advance their agenda. Not even to do something good for us, we the people, just to advance an agenda that only benefit themselves. Because the reason that they provide that kind of, they borrow money and give us the debt, we the people, hand that debt to us to give to wealthy individual and large corporation, is because they're expecting to get campaign finance money from those groups. So the hell with us, the hell with the people. So they have to deal in deception. When they were against Obamacare, now don't get me wrong, there is nothing wrong to be against a piece of legislation. There is nothing wrong with that, because this is how you conduct politics. If something you think is not good for the country, that's fine. I can make my argument to you and say, this is not good for you because X, Y, Z, A, B, C. Show that to me, but don't lie about the legislation itself. Because that's trading in deception. And the reason that they, at the time that Obamacare had to be passed, Republicans were on the street. The constituent, unfortunately, they were misinformed. They were deceived by their legislators that it's going to kill grandma. Death panel. My God. These are the people who are supposed to solve problems. But they trade in deception only. Now, here's something that was incomplete. They were in complete control. They went to borrow $1.5 trillion, and they call it tax cut for the people. Is it what a tax cut for the people looks like? The green piece of pie that you see, that's what went to the people. $300 billion out of that money. The whole pie, the bigger part of the pie, went to large corporation and wealthy individual. That's not tax cut to the people, for the people. So they have to deal in deception. Republican legislators have to deal to trade in deception. They knew, because it didn't happen by accident. They knew that's what they were doing. So, but what they say was, we're giving you a tax cut. Not only they lie about that, but on top of that, they lie about the fact that we are responsible for the whole debt. This is trading in deception. Now, Mitch McConnell's proposition to solve the problem is to cut Social Security, to cut Medicare. Who do you think benefits those items? We, the people. Because when I retire, I will expect to take advantage of Social Security, to take advantage of Medicare, because while I'm working, I'm paying into it, into those items. So Mitch McConnell's proposition is to cut those benefits in order to pay for money that didn't used to be borrowed, that we had no say over that. In fact, we said no. 60% of the people in the country say no to that. But now we're responsible for the debt. I don't know at which point Republican constituent would become wise enough to understand that those things, they don't just hurt them. Because it's one thing to think that, well, at least I get $40 in my paycheck and that's the end of the story. By the time that that money had to be paid, I'll be dead. That's also very selfish, because your kids, your grandkids, your great-grandkids, and beyond will have to pay for that. So if you do not control, if you do not put an end to those type of behavior, your kids, your grandkids, your great-grandkids, and beyond will have to pay the price. So if it's not for you, at least for the sake of your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren. Because unequivocally, the Republican legislators are not working on behalf of the people. Everything that they are doing, and now for decades, because the example that I just gave you from Social Security, 1935, and prior to that, many times there were conversations about healthcare, to provide healthcare to the nation. Now, if you want to start at 1935, from 1935 to today, 2018, Republicans have always opposed anything and everything that benefits the country. This is a pattern. This is not just something that just happened today. Not only Republicans have opposed, but they have also tried to get rid of. They oppose Social Security, and they try to get rid of Social Security. They oppose Medicare, they try to get rid of Medicare. Tomorrow we will be talking about Medicaid. This is not a behavior that is acceptable by any constituent who is concerned about future generation. If you are concerned about future generation, it is time that you start sticking to the Republican Party, because it is definitely not good for the country. I'll be right back. Join me here on the 4th branch at 10:30 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. every Saturday. Join me here on the 4th branch at 10:30 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. every Saturday.
McJordan himself was right here in my McDonald's. I fixed him the very first McJordan special.
Right, Bill.
I did. I took a quarter-pound of pure beef, smoked bacon, cheese, and some of my favorite barbecue sauce, and I named it the McJordan Special.
Bill, the sandwich, definitely great.
Yeah, but you got the cooling with that story.
But it's true.
How you doing, Bill?
Hi, Michael. Michael.
The McJordan Special for a limited time.
Go. I'm not going to try to get into the mind of Donald Trump because I don't think there's a whole lot of space there. I think he's a kook. I think he's crazy. I think he's unfit for office. And I'm a Republican and he's not. He's not a conservative Republican. He's an opportunist. He could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and 25 or 30% of the people would still follow him because he gives voice to their anger and their frustration. But he's not fit to be President of the United States.
We are talking about back to the fight of the entitlement system. Mitch McConnell proposed to pay for the national debt, which the Republican Party single-handedly just added $2.2 trillion for no reason whatsoever. His solution: to cut Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. It is time. Sound-minded, decent, and morally bound Americans take over the operation and the functioning of our government. For far too long, we have entrusted the legislators in Washington in our respective state to attend to the interest of the country, but they have violated our trust. They have misled us. They have instead attended to their own selfish interests and in the process destroyed the very institution which have guaranteed a system of justice and protected our democracy. Yes, we, the people, are somewhat responsible for this predicament as well. We do have our share of responsibility. We, the people, have been too disengaged in political discussion, in political debates. We indeed have been deceived by the legislators who have mastered the art of deception, the art of pinning one group against the other, one party against the other. On February 2017, 1 month after Trump assumed the presidency, the Republican Party single-handedly passed a $1.5 trillion tax cut, opposed by 60% of the American constituent. And later, they try again to kill Obamacare, which provides coverage to well over 20 million individuals. Yes, the list goes on. And yet, election after election, the Republican constituents send those same individuals back to Washington. Although both political parties are to blame for the state of the republic, but the Republican Party has long lost its way. GOP leaders have long abandoned the principles, the virtues the party used to stand for. By most analysis, GOP legislators do not think in terms of the country. They do not think in terms of future generations. Today, they seek instant gratification. They want campaign financing. It is time. It is well overdue. Republican constituents get rid of all those old legislators who have long lost touch with reality, with changing time and a changing culture. It is time. It is up to us. It is definitely up to the rest of us to put an end to that madness. You see, the country is not divided between Democrats and Republicans, but it is divided between those who seek knowledge and those who decide to stay and live in ignorance. The country is divided between those who seek the truth and wisdom and those who promote and enjoy falsehoods. Those who have made use of their brands and those who have outsourced theirs. Today, the United States is in dire need of a leader who knows the way, shows the way, and is willing to go all the way. Join me here on the 4th branch at 10:30 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. every Saturday. I thank you for taking the time, for spending the time with me, and I invite you tomorrow for the next section of the discussion, which is Medicaid, in which we will try to provide some information about that benefit as well, which is one of those benefits that Mitch McConnell proposed to cut as a solution to the growing national debt, which the Republican Party has single-handedly, up to this point this year, added $2.2 trillion. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a good afternoon or a good evening, whichever that happens to be. Hope to see you tomorrow for another episode of the 4th Branch program. The 4th Branch podcast is brought to you in collaboration with the People Branch publication, which can be found on the People Branch website, located at peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org website, in which you will find a number of very interesting articles. My name is Mike Duchesne, MD for short. I hope you have a great afternoon or a great evening, whichever it happens to be. Hopefully you can join me again next time for another interesting episode of this podcast. That was the 4th Branch, live from New York. Good day.